Hello, my name is Emily Barrera, and today I will be presenting my research paper titled Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber and the Dark Side of the Human Mind for English 101 with Professor Emily Beals. The primary text which I will be referencing throughout the presentation is Richard Tythcott's critical essay, The Horror in the Mirror, Average Joe and the Mechanical Monster. Tythcott is the author of Men and Monsters, Jeffrey Dahmer and the Construction of the Serial Killer, 1997, from which the excerpt was taken from. Introduction. The brain is the most complex organ of the body. It controls the automatic systems of our body, such as breathing and the beating of the heart. It coordinates our movements, thoughts, and feelings, and contains one of the most extraordinary aspects that define a person, the mind. The mind is one's consciousness, understanding of things, and the process of our thoughts. Because of our minds, humans have achieved many things throughout the years and evolved, becoming the society we are today. However, not all that goes through our minds is rainbows and butterflies. Our minds are also the cause of many tragedies in the world, from murder to suicide, from sex trafficking to terrorist attacks, from being a regular person to becoming a serial killer. The human mind is indeed capable of extraordinary things, but it is also capable of atrocious ones. That is why, in this paper, I will explore the way the human mind can become monstrous and still appear normal to the outside world by examining Richard Tythcott's critical essay, The Horror in the Mirror, Average Joe and the Mechanical Monster, in order to reveal that all humans have monsters within them and how extreme they can become. Theodore Kaczynski, better known as the Unabomber, was born on May 22, 1942, in Illinois, Chicago. He was a genius and prodigy in math. Because of his intelligence, he skipped grades and eventually acquired a scholarship to go to Harvard University, which he attended at the age of 16. He earned a PhD in math at the University of Michigan. After graduation, he got a job as an assistant for a math professor at the University of California, Berkeley. Without further notice, he resigned from his post in 1969 and built a cabin in Montana to isolate himself and become self-sufficient by developing gardening skills, hunting skills, knowledge on edible plants, etc. He lived in that cabin until the day of his arrest. Kaczynski's terrorist attacks began in 1978 when he mailed a bomb to a security officer at Northwestern University in Evanston. This was the first bomb of 15 more that were to come, that unfortunately took the life of 3 and injured 23. He targeted people whom he thought were contributing to the industrialization and technology, given that he was strongly against it. He made his reasons and beliefs very clear in his 35,000-word essay, or better known as a manifesto, titled Industrial Society and Its Future, that was published by the Washington Post in 1995, where he gave a thorough and detailed explanation of why he believes that industrialization is destroying society and nature. Before moving forward with the minor claims, I would like to mention that I will be using an article on Dr. Sally C. Johnson's psychiatric evaluation conducted on Kaczynski in 1996. Moving on with minor claim number 1. During Kaczynski's interviews with Dr. Sally C. Johnson, he focused on the fact that he lacked social skills, which caused him to endure severe isolation. Because of the isolation he put himself through, he experienced emotional distress that turned otherwise a normal person into something more dangerous. He experienced feelings of anger and revenge towards his family, but also towards his dreams that were haunting him. This is the beginning of Kaczynski's transition from a regular person to a serial killer. This is where all those negative feelings began to rise that eventually turned into something more dark and dangerous. In those dreams that he was experiencing, he saw an organized society that was trying to claim his mind. To be more specific, he would see psychologists that were trying to claim his mind, which made him angry and act with violence, killing those psychologists. Although it's normal for humans to act with violence while feeling threatened, his case was much different. Not only did he act with violence, but he got a feeling of liberation and release, which is far different from the normal instinct of self-defense. Minor claim number 2. In one of the interviews with Dr. Johnson, Kaczynski stated, "I would therefore indulge in fantasies of revenge. However, I never attempted to put such fantasies in action. My fear of being caught and punished was all out of proportion." Due to the fact that he wasn't able to express the negative feelings he was experiencing, those feelings grew and became darker. The only thing that was holding him back was the fear of the consequences that those acts would bring. All these atrocious thoughts were roaming his mind during his high school and college years, while being seen as a completely normal person, a genius that was on the path of success. Minor claim number 3. The moment Kaczynski decided to embrace his fantasies and act on his desires, he was no longer your average Joe. He let his monsters loose, and by doing so, he himself became a monster. As Tythcott stated, "Our depiction of a serial killer is also a picture of average Joe who has given in to his deeper desires. Our monsters turn out to be not something monstrous disguised as Joe, but Joe who has left it all hang out." The moment Kaczynski decided to not care, to not fear the consequences of acting on his dark desires and fantasies, he became a monster. His desires became so extreme that his actions became extreme as well. Minor claim number 4. Kaczynski became what is described as a mechanical monster in The Horror in the Mirror, Average Joe and the Mechanical Monster, where Tythcott states, "The figure of the killer as unfeeling, programmed machine, and contributes to our sense of the uncanny is the defining characteristic of the serial killer, the repetitiveness of the killing act." As I mentioned before, Kaczynski no longer cared or feared about the consequences of his acts. He embraced his desires, and by doing so, he hurt people. He murdered people. He committed terrorist attacks. Not once, but 16 times. Once was not enough. He needed to feed his desires and fantasies, and he was able to do so because of the lack of empathy, guilt, any connection to the aspects that make us human. He was no longer your regular human. He was a mechanical monster. Naysayer. Kaczynski went through psychiatric evaluation because he requested to represent himself in court. In order to do so, he had to prove that he was mentally fit to represent himself. Dr. Johnson diagnosed Kaczynski with paranoid schizophrenia. However, she still found him fit to sustain trial. In her report, she states, "Despite the presence of significant mental illness historically and residual evidence of such problems at the present, Mr. Kaczynski is able to understand the nature and consequences of the proceedings against him, and is able to assist his attorneys in his defense." The situation caused debate and conflict due to the fact that some people believed the fact of someone committing terrorist attacks on its own means they are insane, while others believe that if one is able to commit such acts, they know what they are doing and completely understand the wrong of their actions. I don't disregard the fact that insanity can be the cause of someone's crimes, but I don't believe that insanity on its own can push someone to do such things as the ones Kaczynski did. I believe there has to be a trigger, maybe a traumatic event, maybe something they saw, something they heard, something as mild as something they saw in a movie that could bring those thoughts to their mind, curiosity maybe. But the fact is that the thought was already there. Of course, that doesn't mean you're a monster, but as I mentioned before, the way someone reacts or acts on those thoughts is what will define them as a person in the future. If someone decides to explore, to embrace those thoughts, it could develop into something more dangerous, grotesque. It could potentially turn that person into a monster, into a serial killer. The human mind is unpredictable and unreadable. We could never truly know with certainty what another person is thinking. That is why it is important to keep in mind the extent and extreme a mind is capable of reaching. As humans, we are imperfect and we tend to have dark thoughts at times. It is the way we respond to these thoughts what will define us as a person, and whether we choose to stay the average Joe and repress such thoughts, or if we decide to embrace them and become the mechanical monster. The choice is ours. We must be wary of the people that surround us. We can be standing in the same room as a monster and not even know it. Or maybe not. But one thing is for sure, we have met the monster. We are the monster.